The morning sun cast long shadows across the grand halls of Windsor Castle as James Fletcher began his daily rounds. He had been working as a palace guard for 15 years, and nothing much surprised him anymore. The royal family had their secrets, their quiet moments, and their public faces. James had seen it all, or so he thought. Today felt different somehow. Queen Camilla seemed more nervous than usual during breakfast, constantly glancing toward the main staircase. Her son Tom Parker Bowles had arrived the night before for what was supposed to be a simple family visit. But James noticed the tension in the air, thick as London fog. As James walked through the guest wing, he heard raised voices coming from Tom's room. He couldn't make out the words, but the tone was urgent, almost desperate. Camilla's voice mixed with Tom's in what sounded like an argument. This was unusual because Tom was generally calm and respectful during his visits to the palace. The voices suddenly stopped when footsteps approached in the hallway. James quickly moved to check the security cameras, pretending to be busy with his regular duties. Through the monitors, he watched as Prince William walked past Tom's room, pausing briefly at the door. William's expression was unreadable, but James could tell something was bothering the future king. Later that afternoon, Tom asked James to help move a heavy trunk from his car to his room. The trunk was old-fashioned, made of dark wood with brass corners. It was surprisingly heavy, and Tom seemed very protective of it, insisting on carrying one end himself, despite James offering to get more help. As they lifted it up the stairs, Tom kept looking around nervously, as if he didn't want anyone else to see what they were doing. "Just put it in the corner," Tom said quickly once they reached his room. "And please don't mention this to anyone. It's just some old family things my grandmother left me." But James noticed Tom's hands were shaking slightly as he said this. In 15 years of palace work, James had learned to read people well, and Tom was definitely hiding something. That evening during dinner, James observed the royal family from his post near the dining room. The conversation seemed forced and uncomfortable. Prince William kept glancing at his stepfather, King Charles, who appeared tired and distant. Camilla barely touched her food, and Tom excused himself early, claiming he wasn't feeling well. After everyone had gone to bed, James continued his night patrol rounds. The palace was quiet except for the usual sounds of old buildings settling and distant traffic from London. As he passed by Tom's room, he noticed a thin line of light under the door. Someone was still awake, and he could hear the faint sound of papers rustling. James tried to ignore his growing curiosity, but something felt wrong. In all his years of service, he had developed a strong sense for when the royal family was in distress. Tonight, that feeling was stronger than ever. He decided to complete his rounds quickly and returned to check on the guest wing once more. When he came back an hour later, Tom's room was dark and silent. But as James stood in the hallway, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. The heavy trunk that he had helped carry upstairs was now sitting in the hallway outside Tom's room, and it was slightly open. A few papers had fallen out and scattered on the expensive carpet. James looked around to make sure no one was watching, then carefully picked up the papers. Even in the dim hallway light, he could see they were old letters and documents. The handwriting on one envelope looked familiar, though he couldn't place it immediately. His heart began to race as he realized these weren't just any family documents. As he knelt to gather the scattered papers, James heard footsteps approaching. He quickly stood up, holding the documents behind his back. Tom appeared at the end of the hallway looking panicked and disheveled. His hair was messy and his clothes were wrinkled as if he had been sleeping in them. "What are you doing here?" Tom whispered urgently, his eyes fixed on James's hands. "Did you see anything? Did you touch anything?" The desperation in Tom's voice confirmed James's suspicions that whatever was in that trunk was incredibly important and potentially dangerous. James had a choice to make. He could pretend he hadn't seen anything and hand back the papers, going about his duties as if nothing had happened. Or he could look at what he was holding and potentially uncover a secret that could change everything for the royal family. The weight of the decision pressed down on him like the weight of the trunk they had carried together just hours earlier. James looked directly into Tom's worried eyes and made his decision. "I was just doing my regular security check," he said calmly, handing back the papers without looking at them. "These must have fallen when you moved the trunk. I'll help you put them back safely." Tom's relief was visible, but it was mixed with something else that James couldn't identify. Gratitude, perhaps, but also fear. They worked together in silence to gather all the scattered documents and place them back in the trunk. Tom locked it with an old brass key that he kept on a chain around his neck, hidden under his shirt. "Thank you, James," Tom said quietly. "You're a good man. I hope you understand that some family matters are very complicated." James nodded, but his mind was racing. He had caught a glimpse of one document as they put it away, and what he saw would haunt him for the rest of the night. The paper had been a birth certificate, but it wasn't Tom's. The name on it was someone James recognized, someone whose existence would shock the entire royal family and possibly the world. He tried to convince himself he had misread it in the dim light, but the image was burned into his memory. The next morning, James went about his duties with a heavy heart. He watched Prince William during breakfast, noting how the prince seemed distracted and concerned. William kept glancing toward the guest wing, and James wondered if the future king suspected something as well. Around mid-morning, Tom approached James in the security office. He looked like he hadn't slept at all, with dark circles under his eyes and his usual cheerful demeanor completely gone. "James, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me," Tom said, closing the door behind him. "Of course, sir," James replied, though his heart was pounding. Tom sat down heavily in the chair across from James's desk. "Last night, when you helped me with those papers, did you happen to see anything? Read anything? Even by accident?" His voice was barely above a whisper, and his hands were clasped so tightly that his knuckles were white. James had another moment of choice. He could lie and say he saw nothing, which would protect both of them from whatever storm was brewing. Or he could admit what he had seen and possibly help Tom deal with whatever burden he was carrying. The loyal guard in him wanted to protect the royal family's secrets, but the human in him could see that Tom was suffering. "I saw a birth certificate," James admitted quietly. "I didn't mean to look, but I couldn't help noticing the name." Tom's face went pale, confirming James's worst fears. The secret was real, and it was big enough to destroy lives. Tom buried his face in his hands and let out a long, shaky breath. "I've been carrying this secret for 3 years," he whispered. "My grandmother gave me that trunk before she died, and I promised I would never tell anyone what was inside. But it's killing me, James. The guilt is eating me alive." "What exactly are we talking about here?" James asked gently, though part of him didn't want to know the answer. Tom looked up with tears in his eyes. "My mother had a child before she married my father. A child she gave up for adoption because she was young and scared and didn't know what else to do. That birth certificate belongs to my half-sister, someone who has no idea she's connected to the royal family." The implications hit James like a physical blow. If this information became public, it would create a media frenzy. But more than that, it meant there was someone out there who had a legitimate claim to royal connection, someone who was living their life completely unaware of their true heritage. "Does your mother know you have this information?" James asked. Tom shook his head. "She thinks all the records were destroyed years ago. She's never talked about it, not even with me. I only found out because my grandmother left me a letter explaining everything. She thought I should know the truth about my family, but she made me promise to keep it secret." James understood now why Tom had been so nervous and why Camilla seemed on edge. Even if she didn't know Tom had discovered her secret, she might sense that something was wrong. Mothers had instincts about their children, and Camilla was no exception. "There's more," Tom continued, his voice breaking. "I've been trying to find her, my half-sister. I hired a private investigator months ago, and we finally located her. She's living a normal life, working as a teacher, completely unaware that her biological mother is now the Queen of England." The weight of this revelation was staggering. James thought about all the protocols and security measures that would need to be put in place if this person's identity was revealed. More importantly, he thought about the emotional impact on everyone involved. "What are you planning to do?" James asked, though he dreaded the answer. Tom stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the palace gardens where tourists were taking photos, completely unaware of the drama unfolding inside. "I want to meet her," he said finally. "I want to tell her the truth. She has a right to know who she really is, doesn't she?" James felt the ground shifting beneath everything he thought he knew about the royal family. This wasn't just a secret anymore. It was a ticking bomb that could explode at any moment, changing lives forever. James spent the next 2 days watching the royal family with new eyes. Every interaction between Camilla and Tom seemed loaded with unspoken tension. The queen would start to say something, then stop herself as if she was afraid of revealing too much. Tom barely made eye contact with his mother, and when he did, James could see the guilt written all over his face. On Wednesday afternoon, everything changed. Prince William knocked on the security office door, something he rarely did unless there was an official matter to discuss. James immediately stood up, straightening his uniform, but William waved him to sit back down. "James, I need to talk to you about something sensitive," William said, closing the door and taking the same seat Tom had occupied 2 days earlier. "I've noticed some unusual activity in the guest wing. Tom seems very distressed about something, and my stepmother is clearly worried. As the future king, I need to know if there's anything that could affect the family." James felt trapped between his loyalty to the crown and his promise to keep Tom's secret. William was not just asking as a concerned family member. He was asking as someone who would one day be responsible for the entire monarchy. The weight of that responsibility was evident in his serious expression. "Sir, I'm not sure it's my place to discuss family matters," James replied carefully, hoping William would drop the subject. But William leaned forward, his blue eyes intense and focused. "James, you've been with this family for 15 years. You've proven your loyalty time and again. If something is happening that could impact the crown, I need to know. Not as Prince William, but as someone who will one day be responsible for protecting this institution." The sincerity in William's voice broke down James's resistance. He realized that keeping the secret might actually be more harmful than revealing it. If Tom went ahead with his plan to contact his half-sister without anyone else knowing, the situation could spiral out of control quickly. "Sir, if I tell you something in confidence, can you promise to handle it with care for everyone involved?" James asked. William nodded solemnly. "You have my word." James took a deep breath and began to explain what he had discovered. He told William about the trunk, the scattered papers, and his conversation with Tom. As he spoke, he watched William's expression change from curiosity to shock, to something that looked like deep sadness. When James finished, William sat in silence for a long time. He stared out the window, his hands clasped tightly in his lap, processing the enormity of what he had just learned. Finally, he spoke. "My God," William whispered. "Camilla has been carrying this secret all these years, and now Tom is suffering because of it. And somewhere out there is a woman who has no idea her life is about to be turned upside down. Tom is planning to contact her," James added. "He feels she has a right to know the truth." William stood up abruptly and began pacing the small office. "This could destroy everything," he said, more to himself than to James. "The media would have a field day. They would dig into every aspect of this woman's life, and Camilla's past would be dragged through the papers again." But then William stopped pacing and turned to James with a look of determination. "On the other hand, this woman is family. She's Camilla's daughter, which means she's connected to us whether we acknowledge it or not. The question is, how do we handle this responsibly?" James was impressed by William's reaction. Instead of panicking or trying to cover up the situation, the prince was thinking about how to protect everyone involved while doing the right thing. "What do you think we should do, sir?" James asked. William sat back down, his royal training taking over. "First, we need to have a family meeting. Camilla needs to know that Tom has discovered her secret, and she needs to be part of any decision about what happens next. This can't be Tom's burden to carry alone anymore." "And the woman? Tom's half-sister?" James asked. William's expression softened. "She deserves to know the truth, but she also deserves to have that truth delivered in a way that protects her privacy and gives her choices about how much she wants to be involved with the royal family. If we do this wrong, we could ruin her life." James nodded, understanding the complexity of the situation. "When will you talk to them?" "Tonight," William said firmly. "After dinner, I'll ask Tom and Camilla to meet me privately. This secret has been festering long enough. It's time to deal with it openly and honestly." As William prepared to leave, he turned back to James one more time. "Thank you for trusting me with this information. I know it wasn't an easy decision, but you did the right thing. Whatever happens next, we'll face it together as a family." After William left, James sat alone in his office wondering if he had made the right choice. In just a few hours, the royal family would be dealing with a crisis that could change everything. He thought about Tom's half-sister, going about her normal day as a teacher, completely unaware that her world was about to be transformed. The afternoon passed slowly, with James unable to concentrate on his regular duties. He kept thinking about the upcoming family meeting and wondering how Camilla would react to learning that her carefully buried secret was no longer buried. He also wondered how King Charles would handle the news when William inevitably told him. As evening approached, James positioned himself near the private family wing, not to eavesdrop, but to be available if needed. The next few hours would determine not just the fate of Tom's secret, but potentially the future of the royal family's relationship with a woman who didn't even know she belonged to them. At 8 o'clock that evening, James watched from his security station as Prince William knocked on the door of Camilla's private sitting room. Through the security monitors, he could see Tom already inside, pacing nervously by the fireplace. The trunk that had started everything was sitting in the corner, no longer hidden away. James couldn't hear what was being said, but he could see the body language of everyone involved. William sat down across from Camilla, speaking in calm, measured tones. At first, Camilla looked confused, occasionally glancing at Tom as if trying to understand what William was talking about. Then James saw the moment when realization hit her. Camilla's hand flew to her mouth and her face went completely white. She turned to look at Tom, who nodded slowly, confirming her worst fears. Her secret was no longer secret. For the next hour, James watched one of the most emotionally charged conversations he had ever witnessed. Camilla broke down in tears several times, with William offering comfort and Tom looking devastated by his mother's pain. There were moments when all three of them were crying, holding each other in a way that showed just how much this secret had been hurting the family. Around 9:30, William left the room and walked directly to James's office. His eyes were red and he looked emotionally drained, but there was also a sense of relief about him. "How did it go, sir?" James asked gently. William sat down heavily. "It was heartbreaking, but necessary. Camilla admitted she's been living in fear of this moment for over 30 years. She was 17 when she got pregnant, and her family forced her to give the baby up for adoption. She's never stopped thinking about her daughter, wondering if she's happy, if she's safe, if she ever thinks about her birth mother. And Tom? Tom feels terrible for putting his mother through this, but he's also relieved that he doesn't have to carry the secret alone anymore. Camilla isn't angry with him for finding out. If anything, she's grateful that someone else in the family finally knows the truth. James was moved by the raw emotion he had witnessed, even from a distance. What happens next? William took a deep breath. Camilla wants to meet her daughter. She's terrified, but she also knows this might be her only chance. Tom's private investigator has found that the woman, her name is Sarah Mitchell, is 31 years old, unmarried, and works as a primary school teacher in Brighton. She was adopted by a loving family who gave her a wonderful life. Does she know she was adopted? Yes, but she's never tried to find her birth parents. According to the investigation, she's always said she was happy with the family that raised her and didn't feel the need to search for her biological parents. James thought about this young woman, living a quiet life as a teacher, completely unaware that her birth mother was now the Queen of England. How are you planning to approach her? William stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the lights of London in the distance. Very carefully. We can't just show up at her school or her home. The shock could be devastating, and if word got out before she was ready, the media would destroy her privacy forever. Do you have a plan? Tom suggested that we start by having his private investigator make contact, pretending to be working on behalf of someone looking to reconnect with family members. If Sarah shows any interest in meeting her birth mother, then we can gradually reveal the truth. James thought this sounded reasonable, but he could see the potential problems. What if she doesn't want to meet? What if she's happy with her life as it is and doesn't want to complicate things? William turned back to James with a sad smile. Then we respect her wishes completely. Camilla was very clear about that. She said that if Sarah doesn't want contact, she'll respect that decision even though it would break her heart. The most important thing is Sarah's happiness and well-being. And if she does want to meet, then we'll arrange it very privately, away from the palace and away from any media attention. Camilla wants Sarah to be able to make an informed choice about how much or how little she wants to be involved with the royal family. James was impressed by how thoughtfully they were handling such a delicate situation. When will you contact her? Tomorrow. Tom is going to call his investigator first thing in the morning. William paused, looking uncertain for the first time. James, there's something else. I need to tell my father about this situation. He has a right to know, and as king, he needs to be prepared for any potential fallout. The thought of King Charles learning about this secret made James's stomach tighten. How do you think he'll react? I honestly don't know. He loves Camilla, and I think he'll be supportive of her. But this is exactly the kind of situation that could create problems for the monarchy. The press would love nothing more than to dig up old scandals and create new controversies. William headed for the door, then turned back one more time. James, I want you to know how much I appreciate your discretion and your advice through all of this. You could have easily looked the other way or reported this through official channels, but you handled it with wisdom and compassion. After William left, James remained in his office thinking about tomorrow and what it would bring. In less than 24 hours, a private investigator would make a phone call that could change the life of an innocent schoolteacher forever. Sarah Mitchell would go to bed tonight as an ordinary woman with an ordinary life, but tomorrow she might learn that she was connected to one of the most famous families in the world. James thought about the responsibility that came with such knowledge. He had become part of a secret that involved not just the royal family, but a complete stranger whose life hung in the balance. He said a quiet prayer that whatever happened next, everyone involved would find peace and happiness in the end. The palace settled into its usual nighttime quiet, but James knew that none of them would sleep easily tonight. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and potentially life-changing revelations for people who had no idea their lives were about to intersect in the most extraordinary way. The next morning arrived with unusual tension throughout the palace. James started his day early, knowing that Tom would be making the crucial phone call to his private investigator before 9 o'clock. As he made his security rounds, he noticed that both William and Camilla looked like they hadn't slept much. At exactly 9:15, Tom knocked on James's office door. His face was pale, but his eyes held a mixture of hope and terror. It's done, Tom said simply, sitting down without being invited. The investigator called Sarah this morning. He told her that he was working on behalf of someone who gave birth in 1992 and was hoping to reconnect with the child she had to give up for adoption. James felt his heart racing. How did she respond? Tom's voice was barely above a whisper. She was quiet for a long time. Then she asked if her birth mother was in good health and if there were any medical issues she should know about. When he said no, she asked why her birth mother wanted contact after all these years. What did he tell her? The truth, in a way. He said that her birth mother had always wondered about her and had recently lost her own mother, which made her realize how precious family connections are. He explained that there was no pressure, no expectations, just a hope for some kind of contact if Sarah was open to it. James waited, knowing there was more to the story. Tom's expression suggested the conversation hadn't ended there. Sarah asked for time to think about it. She said she had always wondered about her birth parents, but she was also scared of disrupting the good life she had built. The investigator gave her his number and told her to call when she was ready, even if that was never. So now you wait? Tom nodded, running his hands through his hair. Now we wait and hope, and pray that we haven't opened a door that will hurt everyone involved. 2 days passed without any word from Sarah. Camilla tried to maintain her normal schedule, but James could see the strain wearing on her. She would start conversations and then drift off, clearly thinking about the daughter she had given up so many years ago. On Friday afternoon, everything changed. The investigator called Tom with news that made everyone's heart race. Sarah had called back and she wanted to meet her birth mother. She has conditions, Tom explained to the emergency family meeting that William had called. She wants to meet in a public place, somewhere neutral. She wants to bring a friend for moral support. And she wants to understand why contact is happening now, after 31 years. Camilla, who had been holding her breath since Tom started speaking, finally exhaled.
She wants to meet me?
She asked, as if she couldn't believe it was real. Yes, but she doesn't know who you are yet. The investigator thought it would be better to let you tell her yourself, when you're face to face. William stepped forward, taking charge of the practical arrangements. We need to think very carefully about how to handle this meeting. If someone recognizes Camilla, or if the media somehow finds out, it could be chaos. James found himself speaking up, something he rarely did during family meetings. If I may suggest, sir, what if the meeting took place at a private members' club? Somewhere discreet, where privacy is guaranteed and the staff are used to handling sensitive situations. William nodded approvingly. That's an excellent idea, James. Do you have somewhere specific in mind? The Garrett Club has private dining rooms and very discreet staff. I have contacts there who could arrange something completely confidential. Over the next hour, they worked out the details. The meeting would take place the following Tuesday afternoon, in a private dining room at the club. Camilla would go as Mrs. Parker Bowles, not as the Queen. Tom would accompany her for moral support, and James would handle security discreetly from a distance. What will you tell her? William asked his stepmother gently. Camilla looked down at her hands, which were shaking slightly. I'll tell her the truth. That I was young and scared and made the only choice I thought I could make at the time. That I've thought about her every day for 31 years. That I'm proud of the woman she's become even though I had nothing to do with raising her. And about who you are now. I'll let her get to know me as a person first. Then when she's ready, I'll explain about the royal family. I don't want her to feel overwhelmed or pressured. If she decides she wants nothing to do with us after she knows the truth, I'll understand. James was moved by Camilla's approach. She clearly understood that this wasn't about what she wanted or needed, but about what was best for the daughter she had never known. The weekend passed slowly, with everyone trying to maintain normal routines while thinking about Tuesday's meeting. James coordinated with the club staff, ensuring that their arrival and departure would be completely private. He arranged for unmarked cars and planned routes that would avoid any areas where photographers might be waiting. On Monday evening, Camilla came to find James in his office. She looked nervous but determined. James, I wanted to thank you for everything you've done, she said. If you hadn't helped Tom that night, if you hadn't brought William into this situation, none of this would be happening. I might never have had the courage to face this. Your Majesty, you've had the courage all along. You just needed the right circumstances to use it. Camilla smiled, the first genuine smile James had seen from her in weeks. I'm terrified, she admitted. What if she hates me? What if she thinks I abandoned her? What if she wants nothing to do with me after she learns who I really am? James thought carefully before responding. From what Tom's investigator has learned about her, she sounds like a kind, thoughtful person. She chose to become a teacher, which suggests she cares about helping others. She was raised by loving parents who obviously did a wonderful job. If she's willing to meet you, it's because she has an open heart. I hope you're right, Camilla said quietly. I hope I'm worthy of her forgiveness. As James watched the Queen leave his office, he realized that tomorrow would bring not just a reunion between a mother and daughter, but potentially a moment of healing that had been 31 years in the making. The success or failure of that meeting would affect not just Camilla and Sarah, but the entire royal family's future. Tuesday morning arrived with gray London skies that matched everyone's nervous energy. James had been awake since 4 in the morning, double-checking security arrangements and coordination with the club staff. At 10 o'clock, he received confirmation that Sarah Mitchell had arrived at the Garrett Club with her friend, a woman named Helen who had been her roommate since university. Camilla spent the morning trying on different outfits, wanting to look approachable but not too formal. She finally settled on a simple navy dress and a pearl necklace that had belonged to her grandmother. Tom stood by her side, offering quiet support and encouragement. What if I say the wrong thing? Camilla asked for the 5th time as they prepared to leave the palace. You won't, Tom assured her. Just be yourself. Be the mother I know you are, the woman who has carried this love for 31 years. The drive to the club was silent except for the sound of London traffic outside their unmarked car. James sat in the front passenger seat, monitoring communications and watching for any signs of unwanted attention. Everything appeared normal, just another Tuesday afternoon in the city. At exactly 2 o'clock, James escorted Camilla and Tom into the private dining room. Sarah was already there, sitting at a round table with her friend Helen. James's first impression was that Sarah looked remarkably like a young Camilla, with the same delicate features and intelligent eyes. She was wearing a simple white blouse and dark skirt, clearly having dressed carefully for this important meeting. The moment Camilla saw Sarah, her eyes filled with tears. She stood frozen in the doorway for several seconds, taking in the sight of the daughter she had never known. Sarah, meanwhile, was studying Camilla's face with obvious curiosity, trying to find familiar features. Sarah? Camilla said softly, her voice barely audible. Sarah stood up slowly, her hand reaching for her friends for support. Are you my birth mother? Yes, Camilla whispered, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. Yes, I am. James discreetly withdrew to a corner of the room, close enough to provide security but far enough away to give them privacy. What followed was one of the most emotionally charged conversations he had ever witnessed. Sarah's first question surprised everyone. Why now? Why after all these years? Camilla sat down across from her daughter, her hands shaking as she reached for a tissue. Because I've thought about you every single day since the moment I held you in the hospital. Because I've wondered if you were happy, if you were safe, if you ever thought about me. And because I finally found the courage to face what I did 31 years ago. What you did. Sarah's voice was gentle, not accusatory. You mean giving me up? Camilla nodded, unable to speak for a moment. I was 17 and unmarried. My parents said it was the only option. I wanted to keep you, but I had no money, no way to support you, and everyone told me it would be selfish to try. Sarah leaned forward, studying her birth mother's face intently. Do you regret it? The question hung in the air for a long moment. Camilla took a deep breath before answering. I regret not being brave enough to fight for you, but I don't regret the choice itself because it gave you the life you deserved. Your adoptive parents loved you in ways I couldn't have at 17. They gave you opportunities and stability I never could have provided. Sarah's friend Helen squeezed her hand encouragingly. Sarah had told her friend about her plans to meet her birth mother, but she had no idea about the royal connection that was about to be revealed. Tell me about yourself, Sarah said. I want to know who you are now, not just who you were when I was born. This was the moment Camilla had been dreading. She looked at Tom, who nodded encouragingly, then took another deep breath. My name is Camilla Parker Bowles. I'm married to King Charles, which makes me the Queen of England. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah stared at Camilla as if she hadn't heard correctly, while Helen's mouth fell open in shock. James watched nervously, ready to intervene if needed. You're the Queen? Sarah finally whispered, her face pale. I'm your mother first, Camilla said firmly. Everything else is secondary to that. Sarah stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and back. This is insane. I came here thinking I was meeting a woman who gave birth to me when she was young. I never imagined. I mean, the Queen of England. Helen found her voice first. Sarah, maybe we should take a break. This is a lot to process. But Sarah shook her head, returning to her seat. No, I want to understand. How does this work? What does this mean for me? For my life? Tom spoke up for the first time. It means whatever you want it to mean. You can have as much or as little contact with the family as you're comfortable with. There's no pressure, no expectations. We just want you to know that you have a family that cares about you. Family? Sarah looked confused. Camilla smiled through her tears. Tom is your half-brother. You also have a step-grandfather who is the king. And step-uncles William and Harry who would love to meet you someday, if you're open to it. The weight of these revelations was clearly overwhelming Sarah. She sat quietly for several minutes, processing everything she had learned. Finally, she looked directly at Camilla. What kind of life did you have after you gave me up? Camilla told her story simply and honestly. She talked about her first marriage, about Tom and her daughter Laura, about her relationship with Charles and the challenges they had faced together. She spoke about her role as queen and the responsibilities that came with it. But through all of it, Camilla concluded, there was always an empty place in my heart where you should have been. I used to imagine what you might be like, what you might be doing. Finding out that you became a teacher, that you chose a profession dedicated to helping children made me so proud. Sarah wiped tears from her own eyes. I need time to think about all this. It's wonderful and terrifying at the same time. Of course, Camilla said immediately. Take all the time you need. But please know that whatever you decide, I'm grateful for this chance to meet you and to see what an amazing woman you've become. As the meeting drew to a close, Sarah did something that surprised everyone. She stood up and walked around the table to where Camilla was sitting. Without saying a word, she leaned down and hugged her birth mother for the first time in 31 years. James felt his own eyes filling with tears as he watched mother and daughter embrace, knowing that this moment would change both their lives forever. 3 weeks after the life-changing meeting at the Garrick Club, James found himself preparing for another unprecedented event in royal history. Sarah had decided she wanted to visit the palace privately to meet her step-grandfather, King Charles. and to see the world that her birth mother lived in. The decision hadn't come easily. Sarah had spent days talking with her adoptive parents, who had been incredibly supportive when she told them about discovering her royal connection. Her adoptive mother had even encouraged her to explore this new relationship, saying that love was never something to be afraid of. Prince William had been the one to suggest the private palace visit. "She needs to see who we are as people, not just as public figures," he had told Camilla. "If she's going to be part of this family, she should understand what that really means." James coordinated every detail of Sarah's visit, ensuring complete privacy and security. She would enter through a private entrance, away from any tourist areas or official functions. The visit would be kept strictly within the immediate family, with no staff present except for James and the essential security team. On the appointed day, James met Sarah and her friend Helen at the private entrance. Sarah looked nervous but determined, wearing a simple black dress that Camilla had suggested would be appropriate for meeting the king. Helen had insisted on coming for moral support, and the family had welcomed her presence. "Are you ready for this?" James asked gently as they walked through the corridors toward the private family wing. Sarah nodded, though her hands were shaking slightly. "I never imagined when I woke up a month ago that I would be walking through Buckingham Palace to meet my birth mother and the King of England. It still feels like a dream." The first stop was Camilla's private sitting room, where mother and daughter had been meeting regularly since their initial encounter. The relationship was developing slowly but positively, with both women taking time to get to know each other without the pressure of royal protocol. "How are you feeling?" Camilla asked, embracing Sarah warmly. "Terrified and excited," Sarah admitted with a laugh. "I've been reading about royal history and protocol online, trying not to embarrass myself." Tom, who had become a supportive bridge between his mother and half-sister, smiled reassuringly. "Just be yourself. That's what Papa Charles wants to see." When they moved to the king's private study, James positioned himself discreetly outside the door. Through the slight opening, he could hear King Charles's warm voice welcoming Sarah to the family. "My dear, I've heard so much about you," Charles said gently. "Camilla has been absolutely glowing since you came back into her life. Please sit down and tell me about yourself." What followed was a conversation that lasted nearly 2 hours. Charles, with his natural charm and genuine interest in people, put Sarah completely at ease. They talked about her work as a teacher, her love of gardening, which delighted Charles, and her hopes for the future. The king also spoke honestly about the challenges of royal life, wanting Sarah to understand both the privileges and the burdens that came with the family connection. "You should know," Charles said at one point, "that if you choose to be part of this family publicly, your privacy will never be the same. The media can be relentless and they will examine every aspect of your life. But if you prefer to maintain your current life with just private family connections, that is completely acceptable to us." Sarah appreciated his honesty. "I've been thinking about that a lot. Right now I just want to get to know my birth mother and understand this part of my heritage. I'm not ready for any public role or recognition." "That's perfectly reasonable," Charles assured her. "Family relationships shouldn't be rushed or forced. They should develop naturally over time." The afternoon continued with Sarah meeting other family members who were present. Prince William was particularly welcoming, sharing stories about his own experiences growing up in the royal family, and offering practical advice about dealing with media attention if she ever needed it. "The most important thing," William told her, "is that you control your own narrative. You decide how much or how little you want to share with the world. We'll support whatever choice you make." As the day drew to a close, James arranged for a private tour of the palace's staterooms. Sarah was amazed by the history and grandeur, but what impressed her most were the personal touches in the family's private areas. Photographs, books, and small mementos that showed these were real people living real lives, despite their extraordinary circumstances. "It's beautiful," Sarah told Camilla as they walked through the garden together. "But I can see why privacy is so precious here. Everything is so public, so scrutinized." "That's exactly why your choice to take things slowly is so wise," Camilla replied. "I want you to be absolutely certain about any decisions you make regarding the family. There's no pressure and no timeline." As Sarah prepared to leave, she asked for a private moment with James. They stepped into an empty corridor, away from the rest of the group. "I want to thank you," she said quietly. "Tom told me how this all started. with you finding those papers and making the choice to help rather than ignore what you saw. Without your discretion and kindness, none of this would have happened. James was touched by her gratitude. I just did what felt right at the time. I'm glad it worked out well for everyone. Can I ask you something? Sarah continued. As someone who's watched this family for years, do you think I'm making the right choice by getting to know them? James considered his answer carefully. I think you're making a brave choice. These are good people who genuinely care about each other and about you, but ultimately only you can decide what's right for your life. A month later, James received the news that Sarah had made her decision. She wanted to continue building relationships with her birth family, but she would maintain her privacy and her career as a teacher. She had no interest in royal titles or public duties, but she did want regular contact with Camilla and the opportunity to attend private family gatherings. The arrangement worked perfectly for everyone involved. Sarah became a cherished but private member of the extended royal family. She and Camilla developed a close relationship, meeting regularly for lunch or quiet conversations. Tom gained the sister he had always hoped for, and King Charles welcomed another granddaughter-like figure into his family circle. Most importantly, a secret that had caused pain and guilt for over 30 years had been transformed into a source of healing and joy. Camilla was finally at peace with her past, and Sarah had gained a new understanding of her own identity and heritage. James often reflected on that night when he first found the scattered papers in the hallway. His decision to help Tom rather than ignore the situation had led to one of the most positive outcomes he had ever witnessed in his years of royal service. Sometimes he realized the most important thing a person could do was simply choose kindness and courage when faced with someone else's secret pain. The royal family had gained not just a new member, but a reminder that love and family connections could overcome even the most complicated circumstances when approached with honesty, respect, and patience.